The first thing I noticed was the receptionist pretending not to see me. She glanced up when I entered, just briefly, then immediately busied herself with a folder that had nothing inside. I caught a flicker of tension in her jaw. Not fear, not annoyance, just discomfort. Like my presence made the air too thick to breathe. I hadn't said a word yet. I was just standing there, holding a coffee cup with her name scribbled on it and a quiet hope in my chest that I'd catch her before everyone left. I even debated texting her from the parking lot, but I didn't. I wanted to see her face when I arrived. That was the whole point. The glass doors leading to the meeting room were half-frosted. Not enough to hide expressions, just enough to blur the details. I stood there for a second, long enough to see a dozen heads turn. Some froze. Some whispered. One man scratched the back of his neck and turned away so fast he nearly knocked over a laptop. That was my first hint. The second came when someone reached out to quietly close the door. Slowly, not slamming it. Just enough to erase me from view like I was a typo. Still, I walked in. No one said hello. There were murmurs, the clink of a spoon stirring tea, a phone placed face down. Her voice wasn't among them. She was standing near the back of the room beside a man I didn't recognize. His hand dropped from her shoulder the second I entered. Her body stiffened like a fault line. Everyone noticed, but no one acknowledged it. That was the third hint. Maybe the final one. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. She didn't smile. Her eyes darted toward me, then toward the man beside her, then toward the floor. It wasn't guilt that gave her away. It was calculation. She was scanning for the cleanest lie, the one with the fewest ripples. And then it hit me. This wasn't an isolated moment. This was damage control. I walked toward her. She didn't move. Not until I placed the coffee cup gently on the table between us. I got you this, I said. My voice was dry. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. Someone behind her muttered something under their breath. A chair scraped the floor. A woman with a binder full of charts suddenly became very interested in the hallway. Another man coughed, twice, then stood up and walked out, avoiding eye contact like it was contagious. And then, finally, she spoke. You weren't supposed to be here. It wasn't an accusation. It was a confession. She didn't try to hug me, didn't reach for the coffee, just stood there, blinking, her shoulders drawn so tightly upward they almost touched her earrings. I saw her lips part, ready to form something casual, some excuse or shallow explanation, but nothing came out. The words never made it past her teeth. She didn't need to say anything anyway. Her silence had already introduced the truth. The man beside her, the one with the too relaxed smile and watch worth more than my car, took a step back like he'd just remembered he had a meeting in another time zone. His body language was calm, but his eyes, they scanned me with the caution of someone gauging how much damage a quiet man can do. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't throwing chairs. I just stood there, still and stiller, like the floor was no longer beneath me. Maribel, my wife, finally moved. She brushed a curl behind her ear and whispered, "Let's talk outside." Her voice had that trembling softness she usually reserved for strangers offering her receipts she didn't want. She walked ahead of me, expecting me to follow. And I did, but not because I was ready to talk. I followed because I needed to see what her eyes did when she didn't think anyone else was watching. As we stepped into the hallway, the door shut behind us like the closing of a vault. And I swear on everything, I heard someone exhale with relief from the other side. That alone said more than I could handle. She turned to me, arms folded defensively. "I can explain," she said too quickly. "This isn't what it looks like." It's funny how those words always show up right when the lie begins to unravel. Like a script that people memorize without believing in it. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her lipstick was fresh. Her blouse, button one too low for a business meeting. Her heels were the ones she never wore unless she wanted attention. And her perfume? She hadn't worn that scent in months. Said it gave her migraines. But here it was, trailing behind her like someone else's approval. "So explain it," I muttered. "Tell me why I walked into a room full of people who looked like they'd just seen a ghost. Tell me why no one said a word to me. Tell me why he moved his hand off you like it had been somewhere it shouldn't have been." Her jaw clenched. That small twitch on the left side of her face, the one she gets when she's trying not to say the wrong thing, flared for a moment. "It's complicated," she said. "No. Complicated is when someone loves two people. This is simple. You're either in love with me or you're not. You're either honest or you're not. There's no algebra here." Her eyes watered, but not in the way I wanted. Not in the "I'm afraid of losing you" kind of way. No, these were tears of consequence. Tears of someone who just realized the lock on the hidden drawer broke and everything inside spilled across the floor. "I made a mistake," she whispered. And there it was. The phrase that split my ribs open. It wasn't "nothing happened." It wasn't "you misunderstood." It wasn't denial. It was "I made a mistake." A mistake she had time to dress up for. A mistake she shared wine with. A mistake she never meant for me to see with my own eyes. I turned my head slowly, looking through the narrow hallway window back into the conference room. They were laughing now. Not her, but the others. Like the storm had passed. Like the secret no longer needed to hide. I stared at that glass and felt something cold crawl up my spine. "You know what hurts the most?" I said, barely hearing my own voice. "It's not that you did it. It's that I was the last one to find out. Everyone else, they've already moved on. I'm the punchline who didn't get the memo." She reached out for my arm, but I stepped back. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just enough. And then, without thinking, I handed her the untouched coffee. "You dropped this," I said quietly. And I walked to the elevator that, of course, was working again. Because everything always seems to function after it's too late. I didn't go home right away. I sat in the Target parking lot across town for 47 minutes. I watched a woman argue with her toddler about buying the wrong cereal. I watched an old man slowly return his cart like it was the only thing he had left to do that day. And I stared at the coffee cup she didn't drink, now balanced in my cup holder, slowly collapsing in on itself like a structure that forgot it had to stand up. I don't remember turning the engine off, or how long I'd been parked with the windows rolled up, but by the time I checked my phone, I had 3 missed calls from her and 1 message. "I'm sorry. Come home. Please." There was no explanation. No context. Just a sad little breadcrumb on the floor, hoping I'd follow it back to the version of us that used to exist. But that version of us had left the building the moment her coworkers wouldn't meet my eyes. When I finally walked through the front door, the air felt artificial, like I'd stepped onto a stage built to look like my living room. She was there, sitting on the edge of the couch, hands clasped like a student waiting to be called to the front of the class. Her heels were off. Her mascara had smudged. For a second, I wanted to reach out and wipe the corner of her eye. But my hand stayed at my side. "Clayton," she started, her voice dry, her eyes softer than they'd been all week. "Can we please talk?" I nodded slowly, but inside I felt myself bracing, like I was about to hear a medical diagnosis I already suspected but hoped wasn't true. She took a breath, one of those long, desperate ones people take before they try to reshape history. "I didn't plan it," she said. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I was feeling disconnected." And he listened. He made me feel seen. I stared at her, searching for that crack in her words. The moment they'd stopped making sense. But what terrified me most was that they did make sense. I had been distant. I had been quiet. I'd stopped sending flowers just because. I'd been more present for my computer than for my marriage. And someone else noticed. Someone else slid into the space I left empty. She reached across the coffee table, placing a trembling hand near mine, not touching it, just leaving it there like an invitation. "It was just once," she whispered. The lie sat there between us like a wet rag, cold and heavy. Not because it wasn't true, but because I didn't believe it. Not after the way he looked at me. Not after the silence in that room. I shook my head slowly. "You don't flinch like that over a one-time mistake." She said nothing. Her mouth twitched, but no words followed. I leaned back on the couch and stared at the ceiling like maybe it had better answers than she did. "Did you tell him about me?" "Of course," she said too quickly. "What did you say?" She hesitated just long enough to bury my stomach in knots. That we were going through a rough patch. That was the moment something small inside me, something childlike, withered. That was the story she told him. Not who I was. Not what we'd been through. Just a rough patch. Like a broken appliance or a slow internet connection. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh you hear at a party. The kind that escapes when your body doesn't know how else to stop itself from breaking. "You reduced me to a patch. Clayton, please, don't do this." "I'm not doing anything," I said quietly. "You did. We didn't sleep in the same room that night." She stayed in the guest room with the door half closed, like a child waiting to be forgiven for breaking something irreplaceable. I sat in our bed with the TV on mute, watching the same 10 seconds of a commercial over and over again before realizing I hadn't blinked in nearly a minute. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just existed. Numb. Floating. Waiting for the next lie to arrive dressed as a half-truth. And somewhere between 3 a.m. and dawn, I opened her laptop. I wasn't looking for proof. I wasn't looking for closure. I was just looking for the part of her I no longer recognized. The laptop didn't resist. No password. No suspicious logouts. Just the soft hum of betrayal waiting under a backlit keyboard. I sat on the bed with it across my lap, the guest room doors silent down the hall. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to find. I didn't want explicit messages or photos, God. I didn't. I wasn't some masochist digging for pain. I think I just needed context. A map of the decay. A trail that might help me understand how I ended up here, blinking into a screen at 3:19 in the morning, feeling like an uninvited guest in my own life. At first, everything was normal. Work documents. PDFs with titles like Q3 Strategy Brief and August Pitch Recap. A few calendar invites. Boring, almost aggressively so. But then, in the Downloads folder, hidden in plain sight, I saw a string of audio files. 10 of them. No names, just timestamps. All recorded between July and October. My gut pulled tight like a clenched fist. I clicked on the oldest one, barely breathing. It was a voice memo. Hers. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to wallpaper. He's just there. Like background noise. Always gentle, always agreeable, but never really with me. You know. The room didn't spin. It folded in on itself. I sat still, frozen between her voice and the cruel clarity of what she was saying. She was talking to someone, not him, not the man from the meeting, at least, not yet. This was before that. A friend, maybe. Or worse, someone she was grooming emotionally before she even realized it. The next memo was worse. And I know he tries. But he does it in that way that makes you feel even more alone. Like he's performing care because that's what he thinks a husband should do. It's not passion. It's not fire. I had to stop it. I couldn't listen anymore. But I didn't close the file. I just paused it. Her voice was still there, frozen in waveform, waiting to cut me open again. That's when I noticed something else. A folder buried deep in her cloud drive labeled Clean Slate. The name alone sent something cold crawling through my chest. Inside were documents. Some of them were resumes, not hers. The names didn't match. Some were reference letters she wrote for other people. Fine. But then, there were scanned forms. Bank applications. One of them listed a new joint account. Not ours. It was in her name, in his. The man from the conference room. There was no rage. Just stillness. Like when your ears ring in a silent room after a loud explosion. I felt hollow. I closed the laptop gently, afraid that if I shut it too hard, something inside me might shatter with it. The hallway felt like a tunnel. I walked past the guest room and heard her shifting in the bed. She wasn't asleep. She was laying still, listening, waiting. Cowardice pretending to be remorse. I went into the kitchen and stared at the sink full of unwashed dishes. There was a mug with lipstick on the rim. She hadn't worn lipstick around me in weeks, but she had it on at the meeting. It hit me then, how many things I had stopped noticing. I used to remember when she changed her perfume. Now I was remembering it backwards, reconstructing it from the lies it covered. I used to ask about her day with curiosity. Now I did it with dread, hoping not to trigger another vague answer. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun bled through the blinds. Not moving, not blinking, just existing in the debris field of everything I thought I understood. She walked in around 6 a.m. wrapped in her robe. Barefoot. She looked at me like she expected a war. But I was too tired for one. I heard you get up, she said. I nodded. No words. She glanced at the laptop on the counter. She saw the truth on my face. You went through it. Another nod. She took a step forward, then stopped. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It started as an escape. A pressure valve. But it wasn't serious. Not to me. To you, I repeated, my voice like sandpaper. But to him. She hesitated. And that was her answer. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood and walked to the door. No keys. No wallet. Just my shoes and my silence. I needed space. Not to cool off, but to figure out if the man she described in those voice memos was actually me, or just a version of me she needed to believe in, so she could justify throwing me away. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't even call in. I turned off my phone somewhere along 4th Street and drove without purpose, circling neighborhoods that didn't know me. I passed parks I'd never sat in, cafes that never learned my order, side streets I probably wouldn't find again if I tried. It wasn't about getting away from her, not really. It was about getting away from the version of myself who let all of this happen in silence. She said I was wallpaper, a shadow, background noise. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. I'd been coasting. performing kindness instead of feeling it, thinking my routine, my loyalty, my consistency was enough to keep a marriage alive. But consistency without intimacy isn't love. It's just maintenance. And I guess I had maintained her right into someone else's arms. I ended up in a public library. Not for any poetic reason. I just needed a place where no one would ask me how I was doing. I sat in a quiet back corner between two tall shelves of outdated self-help books and stared at nothing. That's when the spiral started. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet one. The dangerous one. The one where you start questioning every single interaction from the last 2 years. Had she ever truly forgiven me for missing her promotion dinner? Was the coldness last winter really just stress? Was that girls' trip to Oregon ever just girls? I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in months. The way she used to lock her phone screen a little too quickly. How she started wearing lipstick again, but never when we were together. The way she laughed at messages she never shared. I pulled out my phone and turned it on. 20 notifications. 2 missed calls from her. 1 from my brother. A message from a coworker about a rescheduled meeting. And then, 1 from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I know who you are. And you deserve better. Please don't ignore this. My heart practically stopped. My thumb hovered over the screen. I reread the message 4 times. No name. No context. Just that. My first instinct was to delete it, chalk it up to some scam or cruel prank. But my gut told me otherwise. I replied, "Who is this?" No response. Not immediately. I sat there for 23 minutes, refreshing the screen like a lunatic. And then it came. I work with her. I've seen what she's done. I stayed quiet because I was scared, but after seeing your face in that room, I couldn't stomach it anymore. My pulse thudded in my ears. I typed back, hands shaking. Seen what? Nothing. I waited another hour. Nothing came. And then I realized I wasn't shaking because I was scared. I was shaking because, for the first time in this entire mess, someone had seen me. Not just looked at me like I was a complication. Not just pitied me. Someone validated me. I drove home at sunset. My stomach was in knots, but I wasn't sure from what, dread or anticipation. When I walked through the door, the lights were off. The only sound was the faint hum of the dishwasher. She was in the kitchen, back turned to me, holding the same mug she always used in the mornings. The one with the chipped handle I kept meaning to throw away. She turned around and froze. "I didn't know if you were coming back," she whispered. I looked at her. Really looked. For the first time in days, I wasn't just reacting. I was observing. She looked tired, yes, but not regretful, not terrified, just calculated. "I got a message," I said. "From someone who works with you." Her face didn't change. Not a twitch. Not a flinch. She didn't even ask what it said. That told me everything. "Someone saw," I added. "Someone knows." She finally moved, placed the mug down gently, like noise itself might trigger something. "Do you want to know everything?" she asked. I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to demand every detail, every timeline, every room and hour and lie. But instead, I whispered something I didn't expect. "No, I want you to know I already do." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She nodded. That was the most devastating part. She already knew it was over. But I didn't. Because I wasn't walking out yet. Not until I understood just how long I'd been invisible inside my own marriage. The message came again at 2:13 a.m., when I was half asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like our old life. The TV had long since gone quiet, its screen dimmed to black. I'd left my phone on the coffee table, volume on, almost like I wanted it to interrupt me. Meet me. Just once. No pressure. Just answers. McPherson's lot behind the deli. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. It was the same number. Still unsigned. Still cloaked in vagueness like a dare. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to. Because I couldn't decide if I was about to do something brave or monumentally stupid. I stared at the message for 10 straight minutes, rereading it like it might change into something safer if I blinked hard enough. The next morning, Maribel was already dressed when I came into the kitchen. Businesslike. Controlled. Every piece of hair in place. Her phone buzzed face down on the counter twice. She didn't look at it. She poured coffee into her favorite travel mug and asked, "Are we doing this?" Pretending everything is normal. I didn't answer. She sighed. "Because if we are, I need to know. I can't take 1 foot in, 1 foot out. If you're leaving, just..." "I'm not leaving," I interrupted, and it was the truth. But it wasn't a promise. It was a delay. She nodded slowly, gave me a strange look like she didn't quite believe it, and left the house with the same careful grace she used when closing fragile things. At 5:58 p.m., I pulled into the lot behind McPherson's Deli. It was a cracked mess of faded yellow lines and oil stains, wedged between two rusted dumpsters and the back of an auto parts store. Not exactly a neutral zone. It smelled like garlic and bad decisions. A car was already there. Silver sedan, parked backward into the corner. And then she stepped out. A woman, mid-30s maybe, long coat, dark-rimmed glasses, plain clothes, but a face I recognized in pieces. I'd seen her in passing. She'd been in that conference room. One of the only people who did look at me, just for a second, and then vanished behind the others. She didn't smile. She didn't extend her hand. "I don't have long," she said, voice tight. "If they find out I contacted you, I could lose my job." "Why did you?" I asked, keeping distance. "Because I saw your face. Because I know that look. Because someone should have said something a long time ago." I stared at her. "What are you trying to tell me?" She took a breath. "Your wife and Evan, the regional director. This isn't new. And it's not just personal. It's strategic." "Strategic?" "They've been positioning him for a VP slot at the new Miami expansion. He wants her there with him. Quietly. Off the books. There've been private trips. I heard talk of transferring funds. Starting over. But not officially. Not with your name attached. You were never supposed to see what you saw." The air in my lungs turned thick. "Wait. She's planning to move." "I'm saying," she said carefully, "your marriage isn't just falling apart. It's being replaced." My hands were fists in my pockets, nails cutting skin. "How do I know you're not just making this up?" She pulled something from her coat. "A flash drive. Slim. Unmarked. I saved copies," she said. "Screenshots. Emails. Drafts of resignation letters." I thought I was being paranoid. I wasn't. "I'm giving you this because if I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to throw the alarm before I woke up in a new apartment, with half my money gone and someone else living the life I built." I hesitated. She handed me the drive without looking me in the eye. "I have to go," she muttered. "I already said too much. Just don't wait too long to look. You need to see it before she rewrites the ending." And then she was gone. No cinematic exit. No dramatic goodbye. Just footsteps and taillights disappearing into the dusk. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, the flash drive on the passenger seat like it might bite me. When I got home, Maribel was in the shower. Steam slipped beneath the bathroom door like a secret. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, flash drive inserted. I clicked. A folder opened. 32 files. Some images. Some text. One titled, "Exit Plan Draft, March." I clicked it, and the first sentence shattered me more than any affair ever could. "Once the Miami offer is confirmed, I'll tell him I need space. If we time it right, he won't contest the separation. He won't see it coming." And below that, a note. "Account transfer final by April 3rd. He won't check. He never does." I sat there, breathing through my teeth. Jaw tight. Chest aching. It wasn't just betrayal. It was logistics. I wasn't just someone who'd been cheated on. I was someone being phased out. And I had 5 days until April 3rd. For the next 2 days, I said nothing. I woke up beside her. I poured her coffee. I nodded when she told me about the upcoming pitch review. I even smiled when she mentioned a brief client trip next weekend. That part nearly broke me. She said it so casually, like it wasn't already booked. Like the flight itinerary labeled J, Evan and M, Rowan, wasn't sitting on the flash drive I had buried in the sock drawer beneath a pair of sneakers I haven't worn in years. I played the role she expected. The quiet husband. The dependable wallpaper. Background noise. But now I was listening to every word. And she didn't even notice. The evening after I read the exit plan document, I watched her from the hallway. She was in the kitchen on the phone, whispering. I could only hear pieces. Nothing direct. Just tone and rhythm. Soft giggles, a low, "I can't talk long," and then silence. She deleted the call from her log before coming to bed. I watched her do it from the reflection in the microwave. That night, I dreamed I was locked out of our house. Not the front door, the memory of it. I was pounding on the glass of my own past, and she was inside with him, laughing like I'd never existed. I woke up sweating, my throat dry, heart racing. She was still asleep beside me, facing the other way. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I felt quietly awake, like someone who just realized the room wasn't dark, they'd just been facing the wrong direction. I copied the contents of the flash drive to 2 different cloud accounts. then again onto my personal email. I printed a copy of the account transfer document and tucked it inside an old book on her shelf, the one she always told people she loved, but never actually read. I didn't know what I was planning yet, but I knew this. I wouldn't be the man left blinking at the gate while she vanished into a different life. Later that day, she texted me. "Dinner out tonight? Just us. Maybe that tapas place near 12th. I stared at it for longer than I should have. She was performing warmth. I could see it now, like an actor mid-scene. There was no affection in the message, just strategy. She was testing the temperature of the water, seeing if I still floated in the illusion. I wrote back, "Sounds nice." And that night, over soft lights and wine, she leaned across the table and did something I didn't expect. She touched my hand. For a moment, I forgot the drive, the files, the scent of someone else's skin on her scarf. She smiled and said, "You've been different lately." I tilted my head. "Good different." She hesitated. Just for a breath. "I think so. Calmer. Calmer." As if stillness was a virtue instead of a symptom of emotional collapse. I smiled back. I don't know how I managed it. It felt like holding up a wet paper mask. "I'm trying," I said softly. She squeezed my hand. "Me too." We didn't talk about the affair. We didn't mention the word trust or future. It was all implied, unspoken, a language built on omission. And in that moment, I realized something important. She wasn't sorry. Not really. Not in the way people are when they're caught in a mistake and want to rebuild. She was sorry she got seen. She was sorry for the timing. She wasn't sorry for the architecture of the betrayal. Just the fact that I walked in before it was done being constructed. The following morning, I watched her pack a small overnight bag. "Business trip," she said. "Just overnight." She kissed my cheek and told me not to wait up. I told her I loved her. I didn't mean it. She didn't answer. When she left, I waited until her Uber pulled away. Then I went into the bathroom and opened the drawer where she kept her perfume, the one she always wore around him. I sprayed it once into the sink. It hit me like a memory I didn't ask for. Then I threw it in the trash. After that, I went into the living room, turned off the lights, and sat in the quiet. And I started typing. Not to her. To someone else. The stranger. The woman from the parking lot. I asked one question. "Are you willing to speak up?" Her answer came quickly. "If you are." I stared at it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. From the weight of what I was about to do. Because I finally understood this wasn't about getting back at her. It was about showing her that the man she thought would crumble is the one holding the last thread of truth. The room felt still that morning, almost too still, like the house was holding its breath. She was gone off on her overnight. But I knew better now. Knew the hotel name. Knew the room number. Knew the check-in time. And still, I didn't rush to confront her. There was nothing left to confront. Only things to let go of. I brewed coffee, not for her, for me. It was the first time in weeks I made it just the way I liked. I added a touch too much cream, left the spoon in the cup, and sat at the table listening to nothing. No soft footsteps. No emails being read aloud. Just silence. But this time, it didn't feel hollow. It felt mine. At 9 a.m. sharp, I met with the woman from the parking lot, Tessa, her name was. She looked nervous, hair pulled back, a manila folder clutched like it might dissolve. We sat in a quiet corner of a bakery just outside the business district. She handed me a file. Inside were copies of everything, signed statements from other coworkers, internal messages between Maribel and Evan, details of scheduled transfers and travel receipts. She didn't want money. She didn't want revenge either. Just honesty. And maybe a little peace. "You don't have to burn the place down," she said softly, "but you do have the right to leave the fire." That stuck with me. I went home, packed a single suitcase. Nothing dramatic, just a couple of shirts, my laptop, a few essentials. I didn't write a note. I didn't scream. I didn't even slam a door. I simply left. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I stayed at my brother's guest house for a while. Told him bits and pieces. He didn't ask for more than I was ready to share. We drank beer in silence. Laughed at old movies. Sometimes I just sat on the back porch and watched birds land on the power line, wondering how they always knew when to leave. I filed for legal separation. Quietly. Cleanly. No drama. With the evidence Tessa gave me, there was no fight. No drawn-out meetings. She tried to talk me out of it once. Called me late at night from a hotel room she pretended was a colleague's place. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just said, "You made your choices. And now I'm making mine." The last time I saw her was outside the lawyer's office. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, spiritually. Like something had deflated inside her. She said she hoped one day I could forgive her. I told her I already had. But forgiveness doesn't mean return. It just means freedom. It's been 6 months. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. It's quiet. I bought a second-hand armchair that doesn't match anything else in the room, and I love it for exactly that reason. I started reading again. Books I never made time for. I go on long walks. I cook for myself. The kind of meals I used to cook for both of us. Except now I don't leave out the garlic just because she didn't like the smell. And sometimes, when I pass by the mirror, I catch myself smiling. Not for anyone. Not to prove anything. Just because. I don't miss the marriage. I miss the idea of it. But I don't miss being invisible. I don't miss having to guess what version of her would walk through the door each night. What I've learned is that healing isn't loud. It's not a single moment. It's slow. It's quiet. It's waking up one day and realizing you didn't think about them first thing in the morning. I never imagined starting over at 38. But I'm not scared anymore. She underestimated me. Thought I'd be the man who stayed. The man who forgave too quickly. The man who'd accept crumbs and call it dinner. But I didn't burn the house down. I walked out of it with the only thing worth saving. Myself.